Something I often say is that all the problems in the world show up in the classroom. And so every problem that we have out there is a problem made by people. And people, the big people that are making those big old problems, they used to be little people. And so if we can go back every instance of oppression and discrimination and prejudice that we see manifesting out in the world, that is a person that used to be a child, that used to have a teacher and a parent and people they looked up to and believed in and learned from, learned how to navigate this world, learned what is important, learned how on to these things. And the folks that have been dealing with prejudice and oppression have been dealing with it since they were children. And so I just want to say how important it is that we are having these conversations and doing this work at this time, because we have an opportunity. We uniquely, as educators, have an ability to have these hard conversations and to teach these lessons and these sensitivities, and how not to repeat the of prejudice and violence and discrimination and stereotyping and assuming that just because you can see the color of someone's skin, you know their character, or you know their capacity, or you know. So I think this is a very opportune time to be having a conversation about kindness and about how we treat people that are different than us, how we treat people that have hurt us, because this is where the rubber meets the road, folks. And all of these big social interactions happen as a combination of individual interactions. And so we must both change our society, but do that with how we change ourselves as individuals, how we individually interact with the people, and hold the people in our immediate circles. So thank you for that intro. I mean, maybe you weren't trying to be, but that is, I think that is really the work right now, is how can we love ourselves? How can we love the people? How can we heal from the hurts that we've all taken in, and from the hurts that we have all done to others? So thank you, Justin. I didn't mean to hold you, but I just want to make sure that I got to have some response. I Again, the main metric I use in this field, would I, well, how I had a group of kids in front of me, how would I language this to them? Or what are the core concepts that would be important for me to explain to a group of 8-year-olds or a group of 10-year-olds? Um, and I think it is important that we be careful with our language. And I think it is very important to be skillful with how we're talking about this, and making sure we are not using stereotyping or marginalizing or dehumanizing language ourselves as we talk about things that have hurt us, as we talk about things that have when we talk about big structural things, it's hard to not paint a really big brush when we talk about those things. But again and again, the guiding star that I'd recommend is what feels comfortable um, with you personally. How do you land this? And that's really where I want to base the conversation today on, is how do things land with us emotionally? To Sarah's specific points, yeah, this is a really complicated topic. Obviously, there were non-white officers on the team that held George Floyd down. There were the police. Minneapolis is a woman of color, a Latina. Like, this is a larger issue that has to do with structural imbalance, that has to do with institutional power and institutional oppression. And even if you personally are a person, but you are in a system that is oppressing people of color, what is your personal responsibility there? Those are enormously complicated and complex questions about how all of us, regardless of our ethnic identity, we're all in this system. We're all in a system in America that has historically marginalized people of color. And so that's something we all have to wrestle with. And as Tia said, that's a incredibly important conversation to have right now. And yeah, it sounds like there are people in the chat that are saying that they're also really interested in having it. So that's something I would be more than happy to be part of, because it's something that I've thought about a lot, and how do I, with my identity and the cultural perspective and values that I'm coming from, tie into that. I mean, I grew up in Texas, so I grew up with a lot of violence and oppression on people based on race, based on nationality, based on gender, based on white people that were in interracial relationships back in the
Freeze
80s
a
and
little
90s.
bit. I don't know if you're
Yeah, sorry, I might, if it gets too bad, I'll just jump off real quick and reset my connection and see if I can come back on 60 seconds later. But I don't
you're
know, maybe
good
just
right
give me
now.
an X or something if I need to go the nuclear option. Thank you, and please keep reminding me if I freeze. Um, so yeah, all that to say, the bottom line is, folks, we live in a world of inequality, not just today, but one that has been unequal for basically the whole run, right? For all of human history, in all over the world. There have been groups of people that have had power and groups of people that were being oppressed by that power and did not have power. And in all these various cultures and in all throughout time, we've seen those kind of oscillate, with people that were in power fall out of power, and then new people come into power. And again and again, the question is, for me, more in the abstract: how do you wield your power? Each person on this call has a certain amount of power that they have in their lives, over their families, over their relationships, and specifically over their kids, because you're all in leadership positions in education. So I'm speaking right now to a very powerful group of people, right? If we look at all of the humans that every single person on this call interacts with and has the ability to influence and the ability to impact, we're literally just in this Zoom room right now. There are thousands and thousands of human beings that are impacted by the things that we collectively do. And that means a lot to me, especially as a trainer. I think this job is very, very important. I think important to be an educator, and I think having really strong professional development and training for educators is really, really important. And that's the context that I come to this job with. When I design my trainings, or and I'll talk. I didn't formally introduce myself, just for context for the folks on the call. But yeah, that is the sensitivity that I bring. Is we have a very small window usually. Maybe it's only a couple hours a day. Maybe it's, we're lucky and we have a whole age. Maybe we have kids ourselves, and so we have 12 to 16 24 hours every day where we're influencing someone who's looking up to us to know how to show up in the world. And so these messages of kindness and of empathy and of caring about people, even if they're different than you, and of taking each person that you meet on their own, and not stereotyping and not generalizing and not saying, because I see the color of your skin, I know who you are. And while I saw someone who looked like you before, who acted some way, so you must be like that person too, right? Because you're the same color. So obviously you act the same way that this last person I saw. That's obviously, I have to be careful here, but that is a somewhat immature thinking. And that's very important to teach kids that lesson. That just because we know something that happened to someone else, we can't necessarily say every single person that looks like that or that has that identity or whatever it is. And this is true on gender just as much as it is on ethnicity. This is true on orientation just as much as it's true on anything else. This is true on nationality. And yeah, Adrian, absolutely right. Kids do have, those of you who are parents have an extra responsibility in that regard. So let me please share with my remaining 10 minutes a really, really important framing that I have found that changed my life when I was first learning about this, when I was a frontline working in an expanded learning program, and has really changed not only my professional interactions but also my personal interactions. And it has to do with um, how we impact people around us. We, um, how do we build these things? So Let me share my screen now, and I'll just talk over it. And I think hopefully that should happen without any calamity. Can we all see the Global Kindness Initiative logo? Yes, wonderful. All right, let me do full screen. There we go. Okay, um, so Ryan McCarthy, as I said, I'm from Texas. I've been working in education about 20 years. I've done education in the Middle East, working with Palestinians and Israelis. I do a lot of workshops on interpersonal skills, so around mindfulness, around restorative practices, around social emotional learning, and I do a whole 12-hour, what I call a teacher boot camp or an educator boot camp on best practices of how to do this incredibly important and difficult and challenging work. So the thing I wanted to share with y'all today was kind of this main idea of how do we deal with people who we're dealing with, and the piece that I wanted to share specifically is something that I call the restorative curve, and it's based on an idea of we're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where if my base needs aren't met, it's for me to think about anything else. I talk a lot in my trainings about cortisol and about how the more stressed we are, the more cortisol our brain releases. And studies show that that literally limits learning in your brain. You have a hard time learning new information when you are stressed out. And as we can see here, if I feel like I'm in immediate threat, in immediate danger, it's very, very difficult for me to think about anything else. And this is the same as a waveform. It's just, I like it a little bit better because instead of a hierarchical period, it shows that our needs are kind of constantly swimming and changing relative to each other. The big question is, what do we do about this? There's someone in our life that's hurt us. They've done something hurtful. Maybe they're a big person, maybe they're a little person. It doesn't matter. They've hurt us and we want them to change. So how do we do that? And that is the restorative curve. And this is something I designed that I think just makes it very clear how we should, what are the best practices of creating social change, either with our families or in our own lives. So the we have on the y-axis is compliance. How much does someone do what you ask them to do? And the x-axis is time. How long do they do it? And so when you yell at somebody, usually you get a big response, right? You yell at them and you threaten them. And you say, don't do that. I'm going to hurt you if you do that again. I'm threatening you. I'm punishing you. This is what I call the violence-based approach. This is our criminal justice system. This is how many of us, me personally, for a long time, reacts to something we don't like. We need to attack it. We need to destroy it. We need to threaten it. We need to punish it. We need to hurt it, right? These, all these violence-based strategies. And then the problem is they don't last very long. If I threaten somebody, or if I threaten a kid to do something and they give me compliance because they're scared of me, as soon as I turn around, the problem is I've removed the threat. And now there's no reason to do what I've asked anymore, because the whole reason they were doing it is only because I was threatening to hurt them. And so then the compliance goes down. And I want you to think, as I talk through this, other situations in your life that follows this same trajectory, because I think we'll find it shows up in our life a lot. And so then the compliance goes down and I catch the kid again and I say, don't do that. And they yes, sure, whatever, don't quit yelling at me, you crazy adult. And then as soon as I turn around again, it keeps going back and forth. And something that I want to point out here is that peaks, those curves, are constantly going down, right? Can anyone, just for a pop quiz, can anyone say in the chat an idea why? Why does violence have a diminishing return on results? If I use the same threat on the same person over and over and over again, why does it start becoming less effective over time? They get used to it. Exactly right, Vera. Or a word that we say is desensitized. And our kids all across the country are being desensitized to violence. They're having to be exposed to more and more violence earlier and earlier, and this is especially true with kids that are in high trauma households. If there are kids that, exactly right, Adrian. If there are kids that are normalized to violence, you coming to them and threatening them more, are you going to yell louder than my dad yells at me after he beats me if he's been drinking? Probably not. So how effective is that really going to be on me as a child? If I'm a child of abuse, if I'm a child that has to grow up with a lot of violence, and I come to school to get away from my parents, to get away from my siblings, to get away from the kids in my neighborhood, and then my teacher just uses piles more violence on top, right? I'm going to get desensitized. I'm going to get what happens to a lot of kids. I'm going to get calcified. I'm going to have really hard walls around me. I'm going to try and keep everyone away from me as much as possible. So what do we do instead? What is the alternative? And this is exactly what the criminal justice system does, by the way. This is what, when we say the school to prison pipeline, this is what we're talking about, where we say, I'm going to teach you anything. I'm not going to teach you the skills. I'm not going to give you any resources because it's your fault that you didn't have them to begin with. I'm just going to hurt you. And I'm going to keep hurting you until you figure something else out to do. Good luck, right? I personally feel that that's one of the most shameful things we do as a nation. Actually, I think the event of the last 2 weeks have very clearly demonstrated that, how broken that approach is and how much harm that it is doing to our families, especially our families of color, especially our communities. So what do we do instead? And the restorative practices, a restorative approach. And what that looks like is that. So we have these 2 lines. The violence-based approach kind of works in that way. And then the other approach we have is the restorative approach. And the way the restorative works is I identify what the needs are that are met. And if I know brief, I've literally got 3 minutes left, but I would write down notes on this section because this is the good stuff right here. Number 1, identify the needs of the person that you're in conflict with. They're trying to get some need met, and they have a strategy for getting that need met, and that strategy is hurting you, or it's hurting someone that you're advocating for, okay? 2, identify strategies, different strategies for meeting the need. Is there an alternate way? Can you make the person feel heard? Can you help them think through another way of getting your needs met? Well, Darian, I know he called you a poop face, and that was bad, man. But when you hit him, you created more problems. And that's why we're having this conversation, buddy, right? Whenever I talk to a kid, the first thing I say is, I'm not mad at you. I just want to talk about what happened. Is that cool? I'm trying to lower their cortisol. So I identify the problem. I come up with an alternate strategy, and then I work with them. I'm a teacher, so I help support them. I help coach them. I say, and even if they're an adult, even if they're my roommate, even if they're my parent, whatever it is, I can still say, I'm here with you. I'm with you. I'm going to help you learn this skill. And just like any new skill, they're going to suck at it when they first try, because that's what we do. We need the training wheels on, right? And so slowly over time, they learn the new skill, and that's why that blue line levels out, and that's really where we want to be. Once the skill has been taught, we don't need to keep teaching it. I don't need to keep threatening a kid that already knows how to ride a bike to ride a bike because he knows it, right? I'm not even involved anymore. And that's where we're trying to get socially. And this is the last thing I'll say, is as we zoom out socially, we're trying to make all of our individual relations and interactions trend towards less violence-based, less shaming, less attacking, less dehumanizing, less otherizing, and getting more towards this restorative approach where we are teaching harm and we are teaching skills on how to reduce that harm, and then we're supporting the people in our lives. And I'm sorry Justin dropped off, because this is so true with the recommendation to talk to your racist uncle. If you yell at him and if you call him a bunch of names, he's probably going to shut right down and not hear another thing that you say. And I don't want y'all to get into a bunch of dead-end conversations. I want y'all to actually be able to communicate with people and change their minds. And this is the way to do it. Now, I do want to say one final thing, and that is If somebody broke into my room and was threatening my kids with a knife, I absolutely would not take this approach. And I want to be very clear in what I'm saying. I'm in no way saying that nonviolence is always the right response. I am no way shaming people who have been, who feel generations of trauma and marginalization and are pissed off about it, and they should be, right? So I'm not in any way criticizing anyone's response or saying that violent response is the only way. I'm saying that violence is not sustainable. And so if that person had come in and threatened kids, I would take a much more direct approach to securing the immediate safety of my community and the immediate safety of my kids. But it wouldn't stop there. Once I had eliminated or mitigated the initial threat, it would then be up to me to process that and talk about where do we go from here and how to learn from it and how to prevent it from happening again, right? Where we get into resiliency, and that's really what we're trying to do: community empowerment and community resiliency. So it's okay to be mad. It's okay to take very strong responses if you feel there's an immediate threat to health and life, but don't stop there. Keep pushing and say, and exactly what was being called for when I first came on the line. How do we increase the understanding? How do we increase the connection and communication across disparate communities, across disparate backgrounds? And how do we ultimately form more unity and connection and love and seeing of each other and healing of the hurts that have been experienced in the past? So that I'm 2 minutes over. I'm sorry, Tia, but that was. I know that there's obviously hours, days, years that we can have and will have talking about these things and trying to find out these specific answers. But I wanted to share with y'all today. This is a general approach that I've found to be very, very successful. Again, both with kids as well as navigating the big people that act like kids in our lives. So thank you so much, y'all, for doing this work and for just being who you are. You're so very needed. This is such an important time for leadership and for compassionate and restorative approaches. So for all of you that are hurting and for all of you that are turning that hurt into action and into creating situations where people are hurt less in the future, thank you so much for your strength and your patience. Really, really appreciate it.